Fantastic. Well, I'd like to say a massively warm welcome to everybody for it, and thanks for joining us, especially if you're joining us for the first time. I can see we've got quite a lot of first-time people here as well, which is marvelous. So my name's Joni Willett. I'm the co-director of the Institute of Cornish Studies, and we host a very regular seminar series for our Institute of Cornish Studies community. And it is, it is with great delight that Shelly and Saxon have agreed to join us from the California Heritage Indigenous Research Project to look at some aspects of our Cornish histories that we never really talk about, but really, really should. So, and this is that we're very, very, we're very proud within Cornwall about, about how Cornish mining has been really global, and about how excellent at mining Cornish miners were, and that's brilliant. But there's a flip side to this as well. There's a massive environmental destruction, but also a really important part of that flip side is the severe, awful impact that mining had on Indigenous communities. And this is something that we want to sort of explore and move and sort of tease out and think about how we move forward from these extremely complicated pasts to to a future where we can all work together. Okay, Shelly and Saxon, is this a good point to hand over? And Shelly and Saxon, who are spokespeople for the Nisenan tribal community in Grass Valley and Nevada City, are joined by Megan Renoir and Ember, and I've forgotten your surname, Ember. I'm so sorry. And they're going to talk to you a little bit about well, they're going to talk to you now. Let's hand over to Shelly now. Oh, I also have to ask, if you haven't already, can you just make sure that that you have your sound on mute, people, unless you're sort of, you're part of the discussion. Okay, over to Shelly.
Hamakini, Hamayabe me, Nishinaname Miwakame, Midam Lily, Yapini.
Hi guys, I'm Saxon Yapini, Nishnanimni.
So yeah, thank you so much. This opportunity, it really just feeds into my brain where these complex, interesting moments in history, different people, where things come together, and sometimes there's a huge collide, a big collision. And in that collision, of course, there's damage and destruction and pain, and there's all the human things that go on.
Lucky. But
in the center of that is my deep curiosity, because I wonder, after all here for the gold rush, what happened after that? Some people didn't. My cousin is my guinea pig today. His family, on one side of the family, directly from Cornwall, the Thomas family, married into our Nisenan tribal family here. And there's so many Nisenan people who are part Scottish, part this, from all over the planet. And we here, the ones that we can see and that are if they're, the folks are in our sphere, we usually know who those folks who maybe didn't stay and went home, like what pieces of our culture may have traveled back home to where you guys. We have so little to, there's such great destruction and shattering of families and lifeways. So moments like this, it came about when someone had told me, and I thought I remembered hearing about this when I was in high school, but that Cornwall and Nevada City, Grass Valley are sister cities. Like there's still a connection. We still have our Cornish stuff that takes place in town. And then now we're in this moment today with you all. And if something's going to stoke my curiosity and my love of learning and exploring things that may seem so cut and dry on the outside, but once you get into the middle, there's some really interesting, beautiful, painful, beautiful stories, you know, that just are human stories. So, you know, today we have our, I feel so lucky. I hope you can't use up all your luck in life in one go, but I feel like people on our team, because we're such a small tribal group, recognized that was taken away. So we had with the United States government that is no longer, was terminated is the term. So we don't have resources that some of the tribes in America have. And so when people come into our lives to help, I just picture them, you know, I'm dreaming of like we need help or whatever it is in any given moment. And then these folks fall out of the sky and land in our life. And so Megan is one of those people, and she reached out. I'll let her introduce herself, but luckily she emailed a couple times because I don't always see things the first, second, third trip around. And so she came into our sphere, and what we tend to do is just absorb people and like, well, now you know, you came in, you wanted to stay, well, now you're never getting out. So Megan is one of those people. So I'd like you to hear from her, and then I'm yabbering over here too much probably, but Megan, would you introduce yourself and just talk about our work together, because it's also one of those moments of great curiosity, and I'm trying to understand in a zoomed out way what happened to our tribe. I know it personally here, but like, where was the rest of the world? What was going on from those vantage points?
Thanks, Shelly. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Renoir. I'm a current PhD student at the University of Cambridge in the UK, so there's a neat little connection between UK and Nevada City here again. And I've been working with the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan Tribe, looking into the history of US land institutions in the 19th and 20th century, and understanding how violence against tribes like the Nisenan and land dispossession can inform our understanding of kind of the relationship between federalism and protracted land conflicts. So what this means in real terms is I've been working with the tribe as an intern for a couple of years, primarily helping to develop the tribal archive and basically gather all the kind of documentation and stories from the point of the gold rush in 1848 and 49, basically to today, to understand how, from a legal perspective, we can move the tribe towards being federally recognized again. I'm really, really excited to be here today. Very excited for this conversation. I think it's very cool to have such an interesting international kind of connection between Nevada City and Cornwall. So super excited to see what comes out of this. I'll say, just by way of like organization, the goal of today's session is to have a very open kind of introductory conversation start between the tribe and Cornwall communities. So we want to give participants of the session kind of like open space to jump in if you have questions or curiosities around anything that Shelly or Saxon says over the next kind of 40 minutes. But for the most part, we'll be working our way through kind of four main topics, primarily led by Shelly and Saxon. So this will be the history of the tribe, the historical connections between Cornwall and Nevada City, the tribe's experience with international support and kind of domestic neglect for their legitimacy and their recognition. And then finally, the aims of the tribe for moving forward in collaborations such as this. So yeah, as I said, please feel free to jump in if you have questions or if you want to make any comments as we go. There's also going to be a Q&A session at the end. But yeah, we want this to really be an open conversation. So that space is there if anyone would like to jump in and take it. Anyways, I'll pass on now back to Shelly and Saxon to speak for about 10 minutes on the history of the tribe.
Yeah, do you want to say anything?
Oh, now let's let you start.
Right.
You're the spokesperson for the tribe.
Okay, yay me. Okay, yeah, so the history of the tribe. You know, our creation stories and our oral history says we have always been here, that we came out of our sacred mountain Estumyanim, which today we call the Sutter Buttes, which is like, people call it the tiniest mountain range
It is actually it's the smallest mountain range in the whole world.
Is it really in the
It
whole
is.
world?
Yep.
Oh. But Grandpa said it wasn't polite to call it the Sutter Butte. And then as I got older and I understood how Johann Suter or John Sutter was put into, how we do with heroes, oh, let's make a hero, yay. And sometimes there's not a lot of factual evidence that go along in that hero making that we're finding out all over the place today. But he was not a good man. He was a pedophile. He enslaved people. I mean, it's pretty harsh. And I still, when I say that today, I have a pretty good filter because some people don't know, the bubbles haven't been popped. It's like when I learned somebody said at school, there was no Santa Claus, like my moment of being crushed a little bit. I see that in people. I have to be careful sometimes when I say this about Sutter, even though it's true. People are very wrapped up. And I feel I have a little bit of ability to speak freely because on my dad's side, they're Naslins, Otts and Naslin family, and they're like first cousins with Sutter. And, I could just imagine that Sutter called him up and we're like, yeah, there's a lot going on over here in the gold rush. You had to come over or whatever. So, I can speak from a position of understanding the complexity of dealing with these stories. You think somebody's a hero over here and look, but they're not over here. Now let's deal with that, all the muck in between. So, there was such a huge population drop in our territory that's never been, it'll probably never, I hope it'll never happen again. Within 5 years, the population multiplied by like 2,000 times what it was in that 5-year period. It's just the incredible, just the enormity of how many people came, and then everybody is hunting and cutting down trees for structures and flumes, and just the absolute destruction of an entire ecosystem that had been there for a really long time was just smashed, with literally under feet being overtrodden. And that there's really the violence that came along with it. You can see in some of the very early gold rush time that countries were sending their prisoners here. They didn't know what to do with the extra people they had that weren't part of society, and they came here. And the early populations are very young, unattached men who I believe they're not coming from a strong family core as some of the little bit later gold miners do, where they're coming to make their fortunes and maybe bring it home, or they're coming to settle here because they themselves are looking for a new life and prosperity. Oh, I don't know why that made me when I said that, because I think it can be easy to get stuck in that moment of humanity is just so icky sometimes. Like you see the worst of the worst in a genocide moment, and yet at the core we're just people, people who are seeking better families, is what I hope anyway. I hope that's the truth. I hope that's the core, and that the violence and the greed and those other things, I hope, are the smaller number. But in those moments, we were created. I am part Scottish, and I've got our Swedish side, and my grandmother is Southern Nisenan and Miwok, who came up and was absorbed into my grandfather's side of the family, our side of the family up here. And then we're Nisenan, and then my grandmother's got some Hawaiian, and there's we did the ancestry thing, and there's like Peru, a whole bunch. Story has never, that was a big surprise to me. I'm like, well, that's interesting. But here we are, this complexity of people. But in those hard times, like for us, our cultures were almost completely blinked out of existence, and in a really ugly way most of the time. And trying not to get stuck on that and see the other shiny side of the coin is moments like this for me. but where the, you know, our work with Megan and conversations like this with people who use more about the world than I do, because I was born and raised in Grass Valley. You're also a tiny world knowing person. Get out a lot, you know, we're just from this small town in this perspective of place. That there's conversations to be had here. And if we don't blame anybody, we don't point fingers, we're not in a role of judgment from our tribal standpoint. Our elders are very strict about that. We're not out there pointing fingers and blaming people, but we do want to truth tell. It's been way too long hiding these secrets in the closet, like the word genocide. You know, even 3 years ago, I filtered that in with another synonym. I'm always wordsmithing, trying not to get people's defenses up so we can have a real conversation and ask the uncomfortable questions, because in there is where the real change is going to happen, is being able to talk about that stuff. But that we're just learning about the Indian boarding schools here. We were watching them be discovered in Canada, and I know my American friends were just like, oh, you know, they were just flabbergasted, and how could this happen? And I said, just wait. That border like does not stop what happened. It's here too. Our grandpa's oldest brother David died in an Indian boarding school, Haskell Indian boarding school, and you know, that's just my grandfather's generation. And then with the wrongful termination of our federal status, the missing and murdered people that you hear about all the time, like these are just total standard realities in our families. And no one ever talked about it. And I just learned this term, gaslighting. Like, I'm like, what a great, wow, what a concept is that when Native people, I mean, that's why our family never talked about the Native part, because people are like, oh, now come on, you know, it's not that bad. You're stretching the truth. They get the gaslighting thing. They think we're just, but we're finally having these conversations, and where does it lead us? I think we'll get a lot further by being able to get all the pain and the owies out on the table and see them all together and acknowledge them, like, oh yeah, like that must have been awful. Yikes, look at that one. You know, check on each other.
Right.
You still okay? You hanging in there? Because only then can we ever come up with those fabulous, collaborative, amazing fixes. That's all I have to say about that. What do you have to say about things?
No, that was good. Actually, I was gonna
Did
ask
you
if
do
you want to
something?
do no,
Whoa,
someone sharing
what
the
was that?
screen.
I'm like, what was
Yeah.
that? That was cool. I thought we were getting a presentation. I was all happy.
No, I was actually hoping you want to dive into like the lack of the recognition that we have right now, and like why was CHIRP created
Oh, okay.
in the context of us being unrecognized.
That's such a great thing to always remind me. I never say these things. I get off on my tangents. So I sit on the tribal council for the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan Tribe. We were created as a tribe in the federal government's eyes in 1913 through President Woodrow Wilson's. We were his first executive order when he came in office. And so that is what gave us our federal status. So what tribes in this country are, okay, I was going to say are supposed to be, because I'm snarky like that sometimes. What tribes in America are domestic sovereign nations. So it'd be like picking up France and pasting it here in Nevada County. We're supposed to be having that government to government relationship with the United States, not subservient to the city, the county, the state. We are on the same level as the federal government. So we got that status in 1913, and in 1958, there was legislation passed through Congress that terminated a lot of those tribal government to government relationships. Some people say this happened because people knew wars were coming and they needed to not, you know, be spending money, although those, I mean, the tiny pots of money, the couch change, I'm sorry. They didn't want to spend money on the tribes. They didn't want to keep up those, I just imagine like foreign relationships with our president in this country with all the other countries is a big deal and a lot of work. And that is what's supposed to be happening here with every tribe. And they wanted to just get rid of a lot of those relationships. They kept saying the Indians are fine. They've been assimilated. We don't need to keep, giving them money and treating them in a sovereign manner, I guess. But the tribes also have sovereignty and the right to self-govern their people on sovereign land that's supposed to be our domestic sovereign nations here. And so in 1958, when this legislation was passed, 44 tribes in California were terminated. And so their lands were either sold, like our land was sold at auction, or the lands were split up with all the tribal families and given over in fee title, which most of the people didn't have money and understand what taxes were and what fee title meant, and didn't have the ability to sustain those properties. And so they were, taken or sold or gone. And so our land was finally sold in 1964. And there have been 41 of those original congressionally terminated tribes in California that have been restored. And we were in federal court 7
years.
7 years. And then for the first time, the federal government brought up the statute of limitations as its defense. And it's a 6-year statute of limitations. And every other tribe in California that had been restored similarly to us were also outside of the 6-year statute, but the government brought that up, and that's why we lost our court case. And so we still have not been restored. I think I saw Frank Lawrence on the call here today. He works with other federal Indian tribes in California, and he's very skilled at what he does. And somehow he's one of those people that fell out of the sky, and now we absorbed him, and he's been with us almost 5 years pro bono. We'll never let him go. We've got deep claws into people. But we're still trying to figure out, is there a path for us to be restored, our federal recognition? And because that remains this big question mark, we started a nonprofit so we have CHIRP, which I'm the executive director. I've got Saxon now. I worked for a lot of time trying to raise the funds to steal him from his day job and bring him over here to work with us, which we finally done successfully. But California Heritage Indigenous Research Project is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to preserve, protect, and perpetuate Nisenan culture. So what we do through our programming and projects is build things that might mimic or reflect in some small way the programs and processes that we would be receiving through if we were federally recognized again. And there's no comparison. There's no comparison, but just some little glimpse of we just got some funding for youth substance use disorder and prevention. And we have money for working with our elders to try to understand, to talk about, and bring some closure to the historic trauma that keeps rolling through our tribal families. I always just thought our family was weird, and then as you learn about these things and what trauma manifests and how it looks on, I'm like, oh, that's our family. I see it now, and without a team of experts and friends and support, I don't know the answer to just undoing all the trauma one day. It's probably what I end up doing is talking to the elders about all their trauma and re-traumatizing them, because I'm like, can you say that again? I got to get this down, Mom. I kid, but so we do a lot through art. We have found ways when the direct conversations about termination and genocide and all these different things, when those are hard and people's defenses get up, there's no more easy talking, because getting through people's defenses is it's so hard. So we have found through art, we have an exhibit and we have a space in downtown Nevada City, and we do art about these topics from a tribal perspective. And people come in, they take in the art, and they're learning and absorbing and engaging without their defenses coming up. And so we utilize art a lot, and it's been a really amazing moment for us. And then just community education. We were totally erased. Nobody knew who we are. So many history books and educational materials say that we're extinct, and we're not. And we're still here, but it's really been on our shoulders that we have raised our own visibility. And it's a long, hard process, but that's really who we are, what CHIRP is
mission.
and does,
Yep.
and why it even exists.
Yeah.
And if anybody on the call has the ability to call up, I don't know, whoever's the president right now, and maybe he'll do an executive order to restore us. It could be that easy. We just got to get on the calendar.
What is our current status actually with recognition right now?
That's a great question. Geez, I wish Frank was here. There's Frank. our lawyers in the crowd. You know, I think we're just carrying on the process, poking those barriers. There he is. He just popped on screen. Frank, do you want to give just the quickest little, where are we in terms of recognition?
Hi, everybody. My name is Frank Lawrence. I'm an attorney that represents Indian tribes based in California, and I live in Nevada City and have been working with the tribe for about 5 years, as Shelly mentioned. Where are we in terms of federal recognition is strategizing a lawsuit to approach federal recognition with a different legal theory than was used in the past. And we've been working at building support for the tribe politically and legally from the ground up. So we've got unanimous resolutions of recognition and support for the tribe from the Nevada City Council, the Grass Valley City Council. These are neighboring small municipalities. From the Nevada County Board of Supervisors, which is the next level up in terms of government organization here, and from the state of California's Native American Heritage Commission, which has legal authority to recognize tribes that are not federally recognized, as well as the Nevada County Historical Society. So we've been building from the ground up, and we've done a pretty comprehensive review of the historical documents with Megan's help. And we've got a new legal theory that's never been tested. And so I anticipate filing a lawsuit seeking federal recognition probably next year. We've been delayed a little bit by a very exciting homeland return project that we're working on right now. So the federal recognition campaign legally has been put on hold temporarily while we try to reacquire some Aboriginal territory for the tribe for a tribal homeland. So that's the short federal recognition update.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, Frank.
Yeah, where's my warning?
There's no warning.
So I think that's a good status update, and of course we'll have the links to all our websites so you guys can dive in way more to our history and everything. But I kind of want to jump into the connections of us with Cornwall, and I think Megan's gonna take this away for us.
It's so cool,
right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Saxon. Yeah, I would just say as well, as Shelly was saying all that, I recall when I started working with the tribe 3 years ago and having conversations about their history, a lot of tribal members said that even speaking about this history is relatively new for them. So in the kind of past, correct me if I'm wrong here, like 15 to 20 years, is that about right? In terms of tribal members' comfort, speaking about the genocide, speaking about their history, and being able to actually start unearthing the documents and resources that actually reveal this history for the legal case. So I'd say for anyone,
the truth telling, I mean, talking about the word genocide, within the last 2 years, maybe.
Being open about it, yeah.
And I'm going to jump in for 1 second, Megan. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's important. I think it's important for people to understand that the genocide was profound in California as a result of the gold rush that happened, and the estimates of the percentage of indigenous people who were killed around the gold rush is something in excess of 90%.
Yeah, I've got.
Do you have maybe you've got some?
I've got the book open here.
She's got the book open, But
but
what I think is important to understand is that the native people who survived were the ones who did not make themselves visible. They were not seen and they were not heard. That's who survived. So the inherited lesson was to not have the kind of conversation that we're having. And so it's a testament to Shelly and Saxon's bravery that they've been able to move to a place where they're able to engage publicly and talk about these issues. I just wanted to say that.
Well, no one's chasing us with guns, as in,
Not at the moment.
yeah, well, right. So we can be a little more brave. We have that privilege.
Frank, that was also a perfect segue into what I wanted to eventually get to for participants of this, is that this conversation is like another branch of these important conversations. So as you listen to the rest of this presentation, really thinking about your own personal history in Cornwall, your family history, and any links you might have to Nevada City and to the tribe, these are the kind of stories that we're really looking to unearth to contribute to this kind of full history. So keep that in mind. As part of the kind of preparation for this session, I decided to do a little bit of research just into kind of like the basic history behind Cornish mining in Nevada City. So I just want to walk people through that before handing over to Saxon to talk more about his personal relationship with that history. So in the 1840s, in the midst of the kind of decline in the tin industry in Cornwall, Cornish miners began receiving news regarding promises of gold in California. So a local ad at the time stated that California's gold region was capable of employing 200,000 individuals for centuries to come. However, the type of gold at that time was alluvial, so kind of surface deposits of gold, and these disappeared quickly, leaving primarily lode or hard rock mining or deposits for miners. So at this time, of course, Cornish miners had unique skills in hard rock mining due to the igneous landscape of the Cornish coast, and they quickly became the primary emigrants to what is today Nevada County. So unlike other mining emigrants, Cornish people had centuries of knowledge of mining igneous rock and knowledge of how to pump water from deep pits. And these were the exact skills that were necessary for the hydraulic mining in the Sierra Nevada. Cornish families came directly to California via ships and overland passages, but they also emigrated from kind of previous emigration tactics. So families that had already moved from Cornwall to Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois in the States also then moved on to California for the gold rush. So just as some numbers here, between 1860 and 1895, at the time when Nevada County's gold mining transitioned into hydraulic mining, Cornish mining families comprise up to 75% of the local population. So it really is a huge majority of the population comprised by Cornish miners. And just a little fact here, the first white child born in Nevada City was in 1853, and this was to the parents of Cornish miners. So there's a very, very long history here, California having been created as a state in 1850. It's very early on where Cornish miners start kind of overtaking the population in this area. So they both buttress the kind of development of the state of California, but also buttress the economic role that it would play for the United States in the 20th century. At the same time, however, the emigration and the pressures of such intense settlement of the region contributed directly to the displacement and genocide of the local indigenous population. So the survivors today, which are known as the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan Tribe, between 1852 and 1867 experienced 93% population loss. Cornish miners displaced the Nisenan from their ancestral homelands by settling in the region. They destroyed native food sources through Western farming and cattle grazing practices. Some Cornish settlers committed direct violence against tribal members in land disputes, mining disputes, and in retaliatory attacks. And Cornish miners would often employ or enslave Nisenan to mine on their behalf or maintain their farms. So it's a very complex history, and I'm going to hand over to Saxon to kind of talk about the nuance of what it must have been like for families to come over seeking, brighter futures, and then inadvertently and directly eventually contributing to the direct genocide of the original people in this land.
Thanks, Megan. So yeah, I'm kind of a split. We'd like to say I have a native eye and a Western eye, since I'm either 10,000 years back here to Nevada City on my mom's side, which is my native side, or I'm I'm fifth generation on my dad's side. So yeah, my great grandpa was Joseph Thomas, He was one of those who came over. He was one of the founding fathers of Nevada County. It's one of those things like, we didn't know Nevada County was lost on my mom's side, but he found us. So yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing yet or not, but so he actually is, a native Cornwall, or Cornell is how my dad would say it, which it took me a while to realize what Cornell is actually. It's Cornwall, but it's their actual native language for where they come from. So it was really cool. Of course, he was a tin and a copper miner, just like the rest of the family for generations above him. So yeah, there was I think 8 generations of just different kind of miners, and then eventually him. So when the decline started to happen, kind of 18th century, is when he decided to kind of jump ship, or I think we'd call it a economic migrant these days, is what he basically was. So his footpath was coming straight to California. So he took a ship, came around the peninsula, landed in San Francisco, and came straight up to Nevada City, like one shot, no stop in between. And he was in his 20s, but he was already a mining engineer. So yeah, he started.
Did you come from a big family of siblings and stuff?
He did. His thing was actually sending money back home, which I guess a lot of Cornish men were doing that time, and years before and after, just because they want to send money home and keep their families out of kind of the worst off workplaces that were happening in Cornwall then. So that's kind of how my Cornish side got here, was the promise of the streets are paved with gold. There's money. We're gonna supply everything for you guys. You just got to get here. And of course, and so for me growing up, it wasn't really like, oh, this is the Cornish side, this is the native side. Like, when you live in a household, you kind of just adopt what's in the household. So one of my earliest memories is actually Augies, which is Cornish pasties. So my dad absolutely hated pasties with a passion, only because his whole childhood, that's all he ever had. And so it was like a really big deal when he would actually cook for us, the pasties. And it's adorable now that I think about it, but we used to have a pasties. I know there's a huge debate in this now that I'm older, but we always did it with the meat, potatoes, everything on one side, but we did in a sweet side. So like you would have like a
all in one.
All in one. And so yeah, and he would always mark the sweet side with an initial. I never understood like why he did it. I'm like, you're just cooking for us, but it was something that was passed down to him, and he never ate the handle, which is the crust of it. I'm like, why don't you eat the crust? And I finally asked him one day, because he was a man who wasted nothing, and I'm like, he's just throwing this crust away. And he said it wasn't for him, it was for the knockers. And I was like, what is a knocker? And a knocker it's like a superstitious mining term for people in the mine. So they were almost like Cornish leprechauns, is like a loose way to describe. It's how he described it to me, and that they could be kind of mischievous, but they could also help warn miners of something bad happening or a wall coming down. So that's why a lot of the miners, they usually save their crust, and also because the arsenic and everything they're eating, so they didn't want to eat that handle. And yeah, it was just something that was passed down to him, 3 generations or 4 generations later, and then it came to me, and I'm like, that's really cool, like how that all happened.
That is so cool. And that's true culture. I mean, that's culture that goes in families that you can't, when you think your family's just weird, when culture is that deep, you can't like pull it apart unless you're sitting with a bunch of other folks who go, we do that too. And then you sit and figure out why, oh, we're all related. Oh my God.
Yeah. And he would call it's kind of like a brunch. He would always call it crib. And I never understood why, and then I realized it's a Cornish word, and a crib is a brunch, what we think of brunch in America. And so there's a bunch of these little culture things that have been like passed down on that side, which is just amazing. But my dad was a very, very proud, Cornish man. Even, he never got to visit, his homelands, unfortunately, before he passed. It was on his bucket list, but life just got in the way. But he was very, very proud. So I got lots of family stories. I'll only go through a few of them that are related more to the Nisenan side. But one of them was from Joseph Thomas. He, like I said, he was a mining engineer. He worked for over 22 years in one of our bigger Providence mines here. And one of the stories that was passed down is there was a Nisenan man that came in, and he was actually asking for help, like money. And that yeah, great grandpa actually just gave we said a sack of gold. I don't think it was like, you know, a sack of gold. It was probably a little bit less than that, but gave it to him and said, you know, this doesn't need to be paid back. And that was like it. So it was that whole thing of like he was struggling, you know, when he first got here to actually survive and then send money back. And then the federal government, you know, the United States and their infinite wisdom was like, hey, we're going to make bounties. Like, you know, if people want to kill Indians, they can actually get paid for it to kind of help substitute some of that money loss that people weren't doing. But yeah, like I said, he was very proud Cornish. And, you know, with Cornwall already going through that centuries before with the Anglo-Saxons and Wessex and everything, it was that he knew kind of that feeling and that historic trauma that was passed down. So yeah, he actually did his best to try to help where he could. And actually when he died, it was the only, I mean, so yeah, everyone, you know, in Cornwall will know this, but like when we have mines operating, like they don't shut down for, I mean, unless there's an accident in the mine or something, they were running nonstop. When he died, the mine that he was actually working at, and he didn't die, he was retired by then, you know, he was 60 years old. So yeah, he had retirement. But when he died, they actually shut the entire mine down for 24 hours just out of respect. And it was one of those things like, you know, it's a really big Cornwall population. And yeah, he was very well liked and loved. But his sense of how he treated the native population was passed down even to my dad. And I love this story because my dad used to never get in trouble, apparently. He was like the perfect child, he would tell me.
Right.
But when he was about 6, going through our hometown, we had old Chief Kelly, who was one of our last Indian chiefs here. And my dad rolled down the window and did the finger guns, went bang, bang at him. And he said the next thing he knew, he was seeing stars. I guess my grandpa just turned and just gave him one quick slap on the back of the head and said, you will treat that man with respect. You have no idea what they have lost and what others have gained because of it. So it's just incredible that, like, you know, the displacement of population, losing over, you know, 98% of the tribe and everything, but there was still really good, like, morals there that people are like trying to like coexist. And that's kind of what luckily my side did. We didn't do any genocide or anything like that, which is very lucky. Yeah, they were just happy Cornish people. They really were. But yeah, they were, you know, they were really proud. Like Megan touched on, I mean, Cornish miners were the best hard rock miners in the world in the 18th century. I mean, they went all over the world too to actually do their mining practices. And it's just incredible the history that they carry, and the pride is just amazing. And yeah, so with the whole like food and culture and everything like that, it's kind of cool learning like different language that's Cornish. And we didn't have a lot of it. And I always kind of wondered why. And then I found out that Cornish went extinct. And they're the huge revive process. So it's kind of like Nisenan. We were an extinct language, and then we're still here, and there's people that speak it. So now we're a sleeping language. So it's just interesting to see like my two cultures are like kind of in the same places as far as like rebuilding from just like, yeah, the attacks and the outside world fighting them and genociding and everything. It's just
Reclaiming identity.
Yes. And so it's really cool to see here. And yeah, like Megan touched on, we do a lot of Cornish things. We still have our Cornish Christmas. We do a pasty throwing contest. So people actually take oggies that they bake and stuff, and they literally throw them down the street to see who can get the furthest. I don't know if that's a native thing for Cornwall, but we do it here. Yeah, I didn't think we'd ever do that. To me, it's a waste of a pasty. But like I said, my dad was very particular, and he said the pasties here were not like the homeland and what his family always cooked. So yeah, my big dream in life is actually to go to Cornwall and have a pasty, because it's besides mining, they're world renowned for their pasties. And I'm like, this is my heritage. And I need to go to see if people actually put like the dessert in the one end, or if they keep it all regular. So yeah, I'm ready for that debate. But
well, we're gonna go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Because we got to go to the Cornwall Museum now. I think we've been invited and got good friends over there. And
yeah, so I think another cool thing is like talking about like the international support for the tribe.
Yeah.
I'll let you dive into
well, you made me cry when you were telling that story. I just thought it was so beautiful. Because that's what I mean. In the midst of everything, you know, your dad I'm happy that he got smacked upside the head. Probably my Uncle Scott, he was so rotten. He was funny, not funny guy, but always on, you know, always joking. And I have picture and all that in his head, like Uncle Scott getting smacked upside the head and told to respect. An old Indian man made me all happy and weepy all at the same time. But yeah, I think some of these conversations, you know, are happening in a smoother way, with less cliffs to navigate with the international community. And maybe it's just, you know, it's easier to talk about things when you're far away from it, rather than standing right inside of it. Maybe we get to bypass some of the home local complexities by zooming out a bit and being able to speak with a different audience, and knowing that we had national value because the gold that was taken from here literally won the Civil War, the Mexican-American War. I mean, these monies, where did they go around the planet? And knowing that, you know.
Yeah, and speaking around the planet too, I was gonna say, our artifacts are around the world.
Yeah. So many things that we don't have. We actually, my cousin friend Tanya got a grant for us to go to St. Petersburg, Russia, because the Russian folks that were here had collected, they were all about collecting everything, I guess, but they collected things very early here in like 1842, right down on our river. These kuksu, which is a very ceremonial and sacred regalia that the men would wear when they did their spirit impersonating dances. And there was a condor dance where the condors were so huge and they would put their wings in the condor wings, and I had never seen these things before intact. And Russia has them on display in the St. Petersburg Museum, the Kunstkamera. And so we went there and I got to see these things. And I get sometimes I feel like a little kid because I'm just so excited that I get to see some of these. Very selfish. I know my elders would say, that's not yours to be, that's not for you to see. Those regalia should be put to rest and be burned and let have death like people. Like they shouldn't just be, you know, there's a lot, again, another battlegrounds of a lot of opinions out there of what's right to do and what's not right to do with sacred regalia. But I'm so excited because I got to go see those things. And then there are collections from here all over the world, and how trippy it is because there's hardly anything at home. And I mean, other than the opportunity to go traveling everywhere,
that's actually a good point. Like internationally, I feel we're really recognized, like as you know, the City Rancheria Nisenan Tribe. Like around the world, it's like yes, and like the invite to come see our own stuff. Like we can't quite take it yet, but there's partnerships that are forming to actually regain a lot of our artifacts. But as far as like local access, like even people that do have it, I feel a lot of the time it's easier to go abroad to see some of our things than seeing what we have that a neighbor has that he's just keeping private.
Well, because they're afraid. There's some, you know, the things that aren't true that people worry though, that if there's artifacts on their land, the tribe's going to come in and shut them down or take their land from them. And, you know, it's just like when we were doing our homeland return, the first question the community has was they just want where they're going to build a casino there. And it's just like so far from any kind of reality, but it's a living fear. And that's why we educate as much as we can. Because the truth is hard enough to get through, let alone, let alone all the other conversations that are absolutely just pop that bubble with a pin. That's not true.
And that's one of the things too, like getting federal recognition will actually help us return our artifacts. So then from and actually I'll let you talk about NAGPRA and what that is.
Oh yes, pause, Megan.
Oh, you want me to talk about? I feel like Frank is probably
whatever you want. You talk.
Frank might be a better place to talk about NAGPRA, but I'm just conscious of the time. We might want to move into the final session on talking about moving forward with Cornwall folks, if you guys are okay with that.
Oh, that's the whole.
Yes.
Okay, this is the good stuff. So as I mentioned before, this is very much an introductory conversation between tribal members and residents of Cornwall. And we really want people to start thinking about what your own personal connections might be, and how you can start digging into your own history to help actually elucidate the past for the tribe and contribute to not just the case for recognition, but the more kind of broad history or truth telling around this history. So I'm just going to pose a couple questions to you two to kind of get us thinking about how people can contribute. And of course, people feel free to jump in if it's easier to ask a question in the comments. Go for that. But you can also raise your hand on Zoom or just jump in with your mic off if you have a question. So just to start, what kind of opportunities have you guys started to envision for the tribe and for CHIRP in terms of working with institutions and people abroad, such as residents of Cornwall? So what are the kind of main ways you think these relationships can help correct that historical narrative?
I mean, a whole bunch of population has family stories where you know the story separately from our story and they match. How we rewrite incorrect. We have to inform those histories in this way. This is the way we've been making ourselves visible for a long time. We don't necessarily have magic papers that say the magic things that the federal government wants to see. And even when we have those magic papers, then it's like, oh, those aren't our papers, baby. I don't, you know, there's just this, Saxon has just got me all weepy over here. I'm still tearing up over Uncle Scott getting hit in the head. Sorry. You know, but it's really showing up, I think, again, it's like breaking that gaslighting thing is like, it's not just us saying this happened. Look, here's a bunch of people who don't have a dog in the race, so to speak, that are just telling family stories. That is history, not a manipulated history. Our history here is manipulated and erased. It's made to look in a certain shape that that is not the actual truth of things. And I think, you know, as a planetarily, we're trying to get to that point, like, well, how about we all just talk about the truth, and not these false narratives that seem to keep existing and existing. So that really, for me, and you guys can, when I get excited about something, I'm so interested in the family stories. That for me, our oral history, stories I've heard from other community members that come, and not only does it augment, highlight, and contribute to a truer, fuller, richer, real history of things that happen here, good and bad. I don't think we don't need to sort those histories like, oh, that's a yummy, sparkly one that makes me cry in a good way, and that one is the icky, ugly one that makes me cry in a bad way. All of them need to be shown. And I know it's hard, but it's okay to say, yeah, that happened. You know, what are we going to do until we get to that point? That's the only way things can progress from the moment they're in right now. And I think that for me is the most extraordinary thing, to not only have that, but a bunch of evidence for the federal government, for somebody's big file that doesn't have enough sheets of paper in it, you know, to add to that. If that's a good thing, we could do that. Also, what don't we know that's actually been completely erased? That by the sharing and coming together of telling different sides of a story, we all might be like, what? You're kidding. I love those moments best of all, of everything, of just like, no way. You know, it's a truth telling. It's incredible on both sides. I know when I spoke to Denzel, do you remember his last name, Ember? I can't remember Denzel's last name. We were speaking about Cornwall, and you know, we don't leave from this area. It's like, where are we gonna go? Denzel Monk. So, and he's like, it's funny because as a young man growing up in Cornwall, they're like, everybody talks about, where are you gonna go? You know, when you get done here, where are you going out in the world? And it said, what an amazing difference of perspectives, of cultures. that today we're safe by time. You know, we can have these conversations because there's enough time between us sitting here today and the folks who were in those moments, you know, 170 years ago. we got time on our side. We could probably be a little more open and truthful than if it was happening today. It might be harder. I can see that. But what an opportunity. And where else? Like what do you guys know that we don't know? And, you know, is there other countries like, well, it's Cornwall, and don't forget, you know, I mean, like the Japan people that were right there with us, or whoever it is. Like, I just don't even know what I don't know. My fill in the blank is always all sparkly, waiting to hear stories that I just don't know yet. And that's at the center of my heart, is just the stories of humanity and being able to inform history in a real way so we can actually maybe move forward together and be able to eat these sweet and not sweet pasties with Uncle Scott's signature or whatever the handle thing is.
I like it.
Was that, did I answer that question, Megan?
Yes, that was great. Saxon, if I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Oh, and photos, if anybody's got photos.
That would be good.
That would be cool.
No, I think that's great too, and especially like how, you know, my family sent, you know, money back and everything else. You know, there a lot of the population did that, so it would be really cool to see if there was like old journals or notes or anything about what happened in California or their experiences. I think would just be incredible to have, and that's something that we're missing on this.
Or I always heard we were part Indian, you know. Old grandpa Cornwall guy said, you know, part of the family came from California, but no one's ever believed him. Like, you know, or all those good juicy gossips is where it's at.
Yo.
So the remaining questions I have, I think, are like remarkably less interesting than what's happening in the chat now. So I might just say that we move on to the Q&A. We have about 30 minutes left. So I don't know if you guys want to take a look at the questions that have been asked in the chat so far, or if people want to just start unmuting themselves and having an open conversation.
Well,
I think,
Megan, if you could just kind of manage the chat and pull out some questions.
yeah. So Lisa Hubbles said, I have a question about Cornish and Indigenous relationships to land. So Lisa, I don't know if you want to come off mute and ask that question.
Thank you. So I'm an alum from Woolman, which is the land that CHIRP is in the process of getting. And that feels like such a healing thing. And I'm really aware of hearing many times about, you know, the Indigenous connection to land being like closer than a relative, like part of who we are. And as a white person, you know, engaged in like trying to do racial healing and ancestral healing, I've connected to my Cornish heritage. And I had, you know, minors who went to Mineral Point, Wisconsin. And as I read more and more about Cornwall, so much that came up was about the extreme poverty there and how little would grow on that land, and people, you know, fished and mined primarily. And the other commonality I'm noticing, you know, so Cornwall had tin and copper, and that was what made the Bronze Age possible, you know. And so then Shelly talking about the gold going all over the world from, you know, where you are, and just, and the healing for me, like there's a sense of just devastation everywhere there is resource extraction, you know, and the missing and murdered Indigenous women and the man camps and all of that. And it feels like it has kind of always been that way, where resource extraction goes on. And yet what I've read about Cornish history and folklore and traditions, you know, what feels sort of sacred there, I mean, and I'd love to know more about, is this being able to go underground and pull up, you know, these stones. Bitterite has in it, from Cornwall.
Yeah, how do the Cornish folks, I mean, I know that, you know, just wherever you drop the needle on the record of time, someone is under someone's foot. Someone is being bullied, somebody is being taken over. On and on and on and on and on. So, and I think that the timeline is like with the East Coast tribes, they've been dealing with the stuff for hundreds of years longer than we did. We're pretty fresh in the game of being conquered and all this. You know, we got to survive in an intact state for quite a long time, compared to other tribes. So, and I know that I wonder too, is that what I don't know, like what is, I don't know much about other countries. Like, what does Cornwall do for, is there a way that the community itself is talking about healing from extractive stuff? Or, I mean, I don't jump into these conversations often, you know, because I'm always looking for the, did we learn a lesson yet? Are we stopping now? Are we getting back into the true sustainability? And true sustainability is hitting that perpetual motion that I believe our tribe was, they were in perpetual motion. They knew exactly how to go with nature. So it was just like, so I don't know, maybe one of our lovely moderators want to speak to.
Do you want me to jump in there? And obviously I can't speak for all of Cornwall, and I certainly can't, you know, and I can only speak to a little part of Cornwall now and all of this kind of stuff. But that's a really interesting question, because on the one hand, you know, we do have lots and lots of conversations about, you know, the spiritual nature of, I was going to say the spiritual nature of rocks, which very much sounds very mining, doesn't it? But but we have a whole lot of standing stones and things like that, you know, very aware that, you know, rocks, as well as being full of minerals and all of this kind of stuff, excuse me, also have historically been imagined as being sacred and, you know, having magical powers, and this kind of stuff too. So it's kind of like a real complicated relationship. It's like, on the one hand, you know, these, you know, these are sacred objects, and on the other hand, you know, and on the other hand, we like digging it up. And actually I want to come to that, because Lisa, you made a really interesting little point tied up with that. But if you ever do a Google image search of Cornwall, what you'll get actually is beach and sea, and from the first couple of pages on Google Images, you'll be forgiven for imagining that Cornwall is all sea and beaches. There's no farmland, for example, and the sun always shines on. There's very, very, very few people, which, you know, all of which are kind of inaccurate. Sorry, we also get a lot of rain. That's another story. But a lot of the visual imagery around Cornwall, and this is not just tourism related, this is also about, you know, people from here will talk about, you know, massively about how they feel connected to this place in so many different ways. And that is about relationship to land. However, then there is also that whole thing about liking going underground and digging stuff up. And, you know, we're still mining China clay. It's looking like we're going to open South Crofty, which is our last mine, our last tin and copper mine. It's looking like we're going to start that again, and it's also looking like we're going to start lithium mining pretty soon as well, which is really complicated, you know. But then it's also this thing like, okay, if we don't mine this stuff here, it's still going to get mined, but it's going to be in the Democratic Republic of the Congo by some kids in absolutely appalling conditions, because the global economy is such that we need resources, you know. And so, you know, I think there's just, I don't know, there's just so many
and then
complications.
globally, you know, there is, and I say this because I'm not a politician and I'm not the one whose neck is out there at this given moment anyway, like, leave it in the ground. That's part of the Earth's neurosystem. It vibes with you because it is magic and it belongs to that stone. If I had somebody coming in and, well, they might have a hard, I was going to say, mining my neural pathways, you know, they might be starving, but, you know, those are mine. I need them to function in my brain. The planet is the same way. And globally, until we can all, as a planetary species, understand that, and that's the part, that's where genocide is going to keep happening, extracted. I mean, until there's nothing left. And then you get into all your sci-fi. We're looking for another planet. I mean, they're already, you know, doing their commercial stuff out to bombing the moon or whatever the hell's going on. I'm like, what? You know, but in any good sci-fi novel, you're flying through cold, dark, empty space with your generations there, just looking for a habitable planet where there's air, water, and soil. And how few and far between it is. Any good sci-fi. You know, we have it all, and we're worried about, you know.
Phone technology.
And
comfort.
I'm a total consumer, and so I'm right there. But until we say leave the planet alone, I mean, we can make the technology to do it better. I think we just need to force our scientists in a room and lock them in there and not let them out until they make free, sustainable, great phones so we can have all of our cake and eat it too. Anyway, woo, that made me itchy. That was a good one.
Can
Otherwise,
I butt in with a question? Hi, I'm Jan Davis. I live in San Diego, but my family lived in Nevada City since the 1850s. And Saxon, I need to ask you a question.
Yes.
Are you oops, wait a minute, wrong page. I had it all lined up here and then I lost it.
it's always the way.
Okay. Are you aware of a man like named Egbert Saxon Thomas?
Yes, that is family. That's actually where I get my name from.
Okay, his mother was my great-great-grandmother.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
Similarly.
Joseph Thomas married Margaret Hicks,
Yep.
okay, who was born in Cornwall, and her parents came over here in sometime in the 1850s and ended up in Nevada City. And so that's my family. I have a ton of information. My grandmother, Lavinia Thomas Rickard, that was her married name, gave me all kinds of information, handwritten notes. I've got pictures of the house that they lived in St. Austell. I went there. I've been to Cornwall 3 times, and I've gone to all the places that my 7 different families that came from Cornwall, none of them knew each other. They all ended up in Nevada City. I'm 75% Cornish background, even after 5 generations. So as soon as they said your name was Saxon, and I went, huh, what? I mean, who names their kids Saxon, really? You know, so I mean, Thomas, everybody's a Thomas. In my family, there was always a Thomas in every generation, including my son. His name is Thomas. My father's name was Thomas. His mother's maiden name was Thomas. And her family goes back to the Hicks family. And Margaret, the story with my grandmother said, Uncle Joe saw Margaret at the train station and fell in love with her. And they got married when she was 17. She had to have her parents' permission to get married. And they had 10 children. I've got all the names and the dates. And I know some of the relatives, some of the descendants. And I don't know if you know the names of Elizabeth Hoffman, Irvina, Melvin Zobel, Kathy Pete. Any of those sound familiar?
Yeah,
okay.
And Kathy is my auntie. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm in touch with Kathy often. We trade information back and forth. So I mean, we need to contact each other after this is all over, because we'll have a family reunion.
I love
Isn't that funny? Small world. I'm in the California Cornish cousins, as is Gage. Hi, Gage. You're right below me in the pictures. And like we say, it's California Cornish cousins. We're all related somehow. Everybody's cousins somehow. So cousin Saxon, that's cool. So we'll be in touch, okay? I mean, I looked up online your organization. I'll get through you, or somehow I'll send a message to you.
Yeah, email them and then I'll get it. And I'll
with my email, right? So my maiden name was Rickard, and so I will probably say Jan Rickard Davis. That's my married name. So isn't that cool?
That's so cool.
Talking about personal, what is it, relationship type things, you know? So that's it. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jan.
Oh, that's rad.
So I'm back on, let's see.
Here I go, all crying again. Jeez Louise.
I'm curious to know if there are any folks on Cornwall side here who have any stories or any questions that this conversation's provoking.
Or any stories about your family and the native.
Well,
Lisa, your native.
I'd like to say something about the Cornish in Nevada County. I'm Gage McKinney. I live in Grass Valley.
Yay.
And first of all, just to, hi Shelly, just to reassure Saxon, at the pasty tossing contest on St. Parents Day, the pasties are baked for dogs with liver crust, organic dog food cooked inside. So, and the dogs gobble them up. So no pasties are wasted. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, that makes me feel better. Yep, that's great.
And my Cornish surname is like Jan's is also, or one of them is also Hicks, and so perhaps we have a relationship too. Something I want to say about the Cornish coming to this country. Of course, they were involved in the gold rush, and those years historians usually mark as 1848, 1849 to about 1855. And then the gold rush was over, and industrialization was really underway. And the Cornish story, there were Cornish in the gold rush. They were actually the people who came, who knew how to mine, which made them special. But most of the Cornish, well, the devastation and the genocide that of native people and the Nisenan was carried on in the 1850s, so that by 1859, more than 90% of the Nisenan were gone. And I may have cut out. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, and these are definitely the histories that we are contributing to. It's so hard, you know, if you want to know
Well,
about usually you can go find a
go
book.
on to say,
Oh,
Shelly.
sorry, I'm echoing over you.
Yes, sorry. I lost my screen, so I didn't know whether you could hear me. But there's there's a whole larger narrative that is, thank God the truth telling about Native people is really underway, and Richard Johnson's book, History of Us, is a huge part of that. And it's part of a larger narrative, which is the racial reordering of those lands that the United States took by conquest from Mexico in 1848. And so where the story of the indigenous people is being told, there's another story that's going to be unfolded, and that is the genocide of Hispanic people. And that is Californios, Mexicans, Chileans were here in great numbers because they are a great mining people, like the Cornish. And wherever the Cornish...
Chilean people in our family stories were very, very brutal. And, you know, it's not just an easy two moving chess game, you know, back and forth. Like you get all of these complexities that we can only solve together. Like, you know, with our family stories, like it really is an incredible moment. I like the way you phrased that a lot, Gage, that reordering, the racial reordering, you know, of this place that America took under conquest. That was a really incredible way to frame it that says so much that I have to talk for 20 minutes to try to say that. That was a good one. Thank you.
Well, in in the midst of that reordering, Cornish people were marrying into, now I've learned, indigenous families, which I'm delighted to know, but into Hispanic families as well. So I have California and Mexican heritage because my Cornish ancestors married Hispanic gals in mining camps in this state and in what became New Mexico. And so the Cornish have a really interesting role in all of this, which is yet to be explored.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
That's cool. I love the complexity of truth. I just do.
Megan, any other questions you see up there?
Can I just say goodbye to everybody, Gage in particular, and my California Cornish cousins who are on the call. This has been very interesting. I don't have a specific story about my family to contribute to this, but I appreciated very much listening to the discussion.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling so left out because I'm not Cornish right now.
No, it's good to be Cornish too. Yeah.
I'm stopping by and getting some pasties on the way home. Maybe I'll feel better about myself.
Oh, there you go. Cousin Jack's pasties, yeah.
Marshall's.
Ooh, Marshall's.
So James says he has a comment that Shelly might find useful about the connection to land.
Yeah, hi Shelly.
Hi.
You're not Cornish. Also, I live in Cornwall, but I'm not Cornish, so we can both be we
Okay,
can both
good.
share in that. And you mentioned about like when are we going to learn and how are people kind of moving past this need for extractive industry. And I had a comment about like the idea of finding like connection to land and spiritual practice when you're like from the UK. And it's really difficult. We don't have any like oral tradition. So there's kind of like a go out and try and find a few people and go to places and see what resonates with you. Like I know that I visit certain places around Cornwall and I feel a deep connection to something there, but we don't have the tradition. It's all kind of lost, and people might come in and say that they have more information than that. It's one thing that's really telling and really interesting is that like when people grow up and want to find like a spiritual path or tradition that is different to like a Judeo-Christian tradition, that like something like the religious and spiritual practices of Tibet or Buddhism are so much more easily accessible than the actual indigenous practices. And there's like there are people out there and they're going out and trying to investigate and try to do things, but I think it's like a kind of like it's at like a more individual level, but I see that people are kind of more slowly coming kind of back together, and maybe it needs to be a kind of picking and choosing and being like, hey, let's try this and let's kind of make a new thing. I just thought you might find that useful in terms of
It's so interesting. I feel and have felt the same way with other tribes, and I know it's Hollywood, and I know, it's so many, it's a lot of Hollywood and a whole bunch of other stuff that the cultures that we see, dream catchers and teepees and pipes and drums and that kind of dancing, that is all visible when you think of a Native American person or Indian person. Like that's what we see. That's what I see, because my culture is so broken. The traditions and the visibility of it are so absolutely erased that's what I see. And it makes me so mad because I'm against that. I'm against that usurping of things to, out when you pop it out the other side, and it's all, as much as I love McDonald's, it's all McDonaldized and homogenized. And that's not who we are. We have our own culture and tradition, and we have to find it within each tribal member. Like now that the elders, my grandma our grandpa's generation is all gone now. And there's only 5 left of mom and aunt's generation. And so each generation is, I know this is so rude to say, watered down or whitewashed a little bit. You know what I mean? I mean, that much further away from the source of culture. If any remains, and if it's still accessible, it's like I always say, it's like a beautiful, intricate pattern on a scarf, and it's fraying, and we're grabbing at the ends, and then we're trying to put it back together. And you know, it might have been like a wolf, and I make a beautiful, look, it's a tree, you know, what's that going to be on the outside? And we're so lucky that it's not quite that yet for us.
Sure.
We've got there are foundational pieces of oral history for us that remain intact, and they're not out in some book somewhere. It's just that somebody in the family kept something. And that little keeping of a tradition or a history or a story or a mannerism of one of the, like, so-and-so used to do this all the time or whatever, in tandem with, you know, newspaper articles 100 years ago today, or some record over here, or an outside story of a family who knew our tribe and said, oh, this happened. Like, we're piecing it all back together. And with the movement, the environmental movement, and people coming in and wanting to conserve and be part of a place, and they look at our tribe like it's, I mean, I'm saying this like it's something special, because I know it is special, but I mean, like it's something special. And it's just back to that same Cornwall conversation with Denzel. He, you know, where were you going to grow up? Where are you going to go out of Cornwall when you grow up? As like, where the hell are we going to go? Like, where do I go? I don't have any place in the world. This is where I belong. But I've been challenging, especially some of our environmental community, is what is your commitment to place? Just place. If you stay in one place long enough, don't you eventually become indigenous? I mean, it's not autochthonous where you're actually grown from a place, but indigenous to what, you know, you have enough generations somewhere. And it is the commitment to place. It's the embedding of story and culture and tradition and bossiness. This is the way we're going to do it. We're going to do it over and over and over and over until it's a thing, you know. Really, that's the path to sustainability. And I'm not saying I don't love to jump on a jet and go to pick and choose any country I want to go to today or tomorrow. I can, and get a new phone and whatever else I want on my way. But that's that selfish center. That's me getting all excited about seeing those regalia in Cornwall. That's selfish. That's not mine to see. It's selfish. It should be resting. And I'm all excited because I get to go see it. It's the same thing. And so, I mean, it really is. It's hard. And I'm the first to jump in. It's growing up or being adult or mature or wise in a way that we can let go of one for the protection and sustainability of the other. And that means each other. Because pretty soon, if there's no air, soil, water, more GMO, I guess, we've got to control it all. That's the only other answer.
Thanks very much. I would definitely say that the stories feel like they're in the land, but I think we need to learn how to listen and take time to listen, and that's maybe something that's difficult. But we just very quickly, I know probably people are pushed for time. I haven't explored them all, but we do have lots of tunnels underground that are ancient tunnels called fogus, and they're not extractive tunnels. And I don't quite know if people know why they were built. They're very, very, very old, like old dry stone underground tunnels that people used for shelter. No, they're not deep at all, but they're for people use them for like shelter and ritual practice, and they're quite a nice place to explore in terms of they're underground. And it's
look at you all shining out. You're like, explore underground.
Like, and that plane ticket, I'll be there in 18 hours.
Yeah. Well, Megan can put you in touch.
All right. Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of Megan, I know we're getting close to time. Do you want to do any closing remarks or get us on track?
Could I just come in, please? I've listened to all of this with quite a lot of interest. I'm Indigenous Cornish, born and bred for centuries. My name is Sharon Schwartz. Some of you might have heard of me. I'm really interested in something that Amy Shakespeare has commented on only a few minutes ago, her experience of working at the Royal Cornwall Museum and looking at the whole notion of Cornish identity around mining. Now, for me, I grew up in a mining area. I'm from a mining background on both sides of my family, and my ancestors spanned out all over the world. When I grew up, the mining industry was dying on its legs and was actually dead in most parts of Cornwall. So I grew up with the shattered remains of this industry all around me, tumbled down engine houses, disused mines, a sense of failure, a sense of worthlessness, that we weren't worth anything. As a Cornish person growing up in 1980s Cornwall, it was grim. There was no opportunities, there was no work. And we were basically being swamped by people coming in from outside of Cornwall and feeling like as if we were being displaced. And that feeling still persists today in Cornwall, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. And then things started to change. Suddenly, we started to gain ownership of our own narrative, our own heritage, our history, our mining history particularly. And instead of being seen as a disaster and something that we were ashamed of, a failure, it was suddenly being lauded and vaulted, and we had a World Heritage Site. You know, we're suddenly on the World Heritage Site list for our mining industry. And this was just, you know, it was like manna from heaven for us. Suddenly, we were worth something. You know, as Cornish people, we felt that we'd done something in this world. Now, of course, we're being forced to rethink that because of the kind of things that you guys have brought up tonight. And I think looking at history through the lens of class, as we've done in the past, has been really enlightening. Through the lens of gender, as we did back in the 90s, has been really enlightening. And now we're looking at it through the lens of race. And this is going to re-enlighten us again. It's going to add another dimension to looking at history. And people who've had no voice will have a voice at last, which is the kind of project that you guys are working on. And I think that that's a really positive move. But where does it leave the Cornish? This is leaving us kind of like teetering on the edge of the precipice, because as Amy said, we don't like to think of Cornish miners going out and raping, pillaging somebody else's land. We'd like to talk about our own land being raped and pillaged by English capitalists. But we don't like to think that that's happened. We, of course, that to happen in other parts of the world. So it's going to be a really interesting and thorny issue going forward. And yeah, it really has to be handled sensitively, I think. But there's space for a new narrative.
It right in there is the beauty. Right in there is the beauty. I feel I'm really feeling everything you're saying. I feel like that all the time. It's like, oh, you know, we finally get recognized and people are looking at us, but we got to talk about genocide all day long every day. You know, after a while, I'm just like, oh, you know, it's hard. None of these moments aren't hard, and some feel a hell of a lot better than others. But it's the beauty of the willingness to talk about it, and it's just because it's not over. It's going to happen somewhere, and you know, we're going to be on one side of the stick or the other in 12 million different conversations and lifetimes or whatever you believe, you know. And it's the beauty in having the courage to face these kind of things, and because it's all true and it's all exists at the same moment, the bad and the good, and I'm the oppressor, I'm being oppressed, all of it, you know, all of it. And we just have to, I mean, I think it takes a certain person to be, or a certain community to be able to see that and be in it and be okay with it. It's okay. And not only is it okay, we are asking, don't be afraid of those questions. Like don't be afraid to put your foot in I live with my foot in my mouth. I live being the layperson in any conversation at any given time, especially if acronyms are involved. I'm just like, what? Always, I never know, you know, and that is beautiful and it's okay. And then some days I know more than a lot of people, especially right now sitting next to this guy. You know, we're everything in any given moment, and to be able to have a conversation like this, I mean, what a model for other conversations to follow in our footsteps, because we've done it and now we'll be all like, you know, you know, we're there for each other in whatever topsy-turvy turns it takes. I just feel the strength of the incredible heaviness of a moment to say conqueror and conquered, you know, destroyer and destroyed. Like, what a freaking great art exhibit. I mean, wow, beautiful.
Yeah. And I feel that too. As far as like, I think communication's the best way of bridging anything. I get defensive with both sides. So depending which room I'm in too, they're like, oh, those Indians. I'm like, wait a second. Or like, oh, those Cornish Islanders. I'm like, wait a second. Yeah. So it's,
and we can
it's
use
balancing
Saxon as our muse.
Yeah.
And just poke him with all the hard conversations. How do you feel now? What
Yeah.
about now?
Because I'm proud of both sides. And like, you know, it's one of the things where, yeah, if I can live within myself and be happy and be good in the community, it's like everyone else should be able to figure
And
it
here
out
you
too.
meet me in the Sutter thing.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Look,
Well, she's the
anyway.
worst.
Absolute worst. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for, I mean, what a good guiding light, and to be aware. Like, don't naively jump into all these conversations. You gotta, I mean, that's what we're always careful, but let's be really conscientious, thoughtful, and careful and bold. All of it. I love it. Yay.
Wow. Oh, sorry, Megan.
Oh, no, I'll hand it over to you to close up, Joni. Thanks.
Excuse me. Absolutely. Wow. And I think, you know, what one of my personal massive take homes from this is, you know, so, you know, at the bottom line, a lot of what we've been talking about boils down to the exploitation and the, you know, atrocities that happen over the scramble for resources. And really thinking through about the unnamed people that all of us are complicit in displacing and, you know, exploiting and all of these bad things with all of the stuff that we unthinkingly buy and throw away. Yeah, which complicates so many of these things. I just want to say an enormous thank you, seriously. Thank you so much, Shelly, Saxon, Ember, Megan. Shelly, it's well, all of you. It's been an absolute honour to have you join us. It really, really genuinely has. And learning more about the complexities of these histories, the really rich complexities. There's a real tendency to romanticize the wisdom of Indigenous people and all of that kind of stuff. But I feel that you are also showing us a really generous model to work through a lot of these really complicated stories as well, actually. And I really appreciate that. I genuinely do. And Shelly, I have to say that the work that you do feels really inspirational. Like, you know, we've been talking for like the past just over a year now, and seriously, I have so much admiration for you. Absolutely, completely, and utterly, genuinely. It's such a privilege to have you here with us, and also I really hope that we can continue working together in the future. Saxon, Adinath, or welcome in Cornish. Wow, it's just so amazing to hear your story. It really is. I mean, and again, Shelly for about a year has been telling me about the complexity of your story, right? And then we hear you telling it, and it's like, oh, the complexity of your story. So many things to pull out, and so many things to explore. And we will get you to Cornwall. Don't know when it's going to be, but we will get you to Cornwall. And when we do, I am so looking forward to meeting you and introducing you to all of this stuff that goes on here, and helping you to explore this place, and and all of these things. So I really hope that we can continue working together. I can see you nodding. That's fantastic. And I think we need to have a little follow up sort of between us to consider how that wants to be. But I'm also really aware that we've unlocked a massive amount of kind of some very interesting conversations going on in the chat, that we want to kind of capture and keep going in various different places. Hang on, I'm just going to make sure that I can just do a direct chat to everyone in the meeting. In various different places, I've posted through a number of our Institute of Cornish Studies forums. So we have a sign up to, if you want to keep in touch with keep in touch with the things that we're doing, we have a sign up sheet where you can get a newsletter. But also this recording will be shared on our YouTube account and also on the link to which is in here. It should be, maybe it's not. Oh. Anyway, and also but the place where we have a lot of our community discussions is on our Facebook page. So I've put the link to our Facebook page there as well. And that's kind of a way of kind of, yeah, just having a bit of a live chat and sharing links that we feel are interesting and stuff like that too. But yeah, oh, this is amazing and I'm so excited for where it all goes.
Yay.
Any like closing remarks in the last minute or anything?
This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm just thankful to have a platform and get to talk to different cousins and meet new cousins. I know that there's
Is that
cousins across the pond too. So yeah, I'm very thankful. Thank you, everyone.
so? Now, if anybody knows about Scotland, I have to figure out my Scottish heritage. So we're going there next.
Awesome. Okay, all right. It feels like this is probably the right time to close. This is the point that I'm really rubbish at. I hate endings, but this is not an ending. It is just a beginning. And a very exciting one. Okay, right. So I am about to close the meeting in, well, first of all, I'm just going to say another goodbye. 3, 2, 1. Bye, everybody.